There is a financial rule many Australian homeowners over 67 do not fully understand until it is already affecting their Centrelink payment. It begins with a decision that sounds sensible, even responsible. You sell the large family home. You move into something smaller, easier to maintain, closer to doctors, closer to family, or simply more suitable for the next stage of life. You tell yourself, I am downsizing, I am reducing costs, I am making life simpler, but then something unexpected happens. The house you lived in was largely invisible to Centrelink while it was your principal home. Yet once you sell it, part of the money that comes out of that sale may suddenly become visible, accessible, and capable of changing your age pension. That means a move intended to make retirement easier can, if handled carelessly, reduce your Centrelink payment. And for some older Australians, the surprise does not arrive on settlement day. It appears later in a smaller pension deposit, a letter asking for updated details, or a recalculation that leaves them wondering, how did selling my own home end up costing me? Today, I want to walk you through the downsizing rule that every Australian homeowner over 67 needs to understand in 2026, because this is not just about property. It is about the difference between a home that Centrelink does not usually count and sale proceeds that Centrelink may count very differently. It is about why timing matters. It is about why your intention to buy another home matters. And it is about why the cash left over after downsizing can be far more important than most retirees expect. Let me begin with a story. Imagine a couple named Robert and Elaine. They are both in their early 70s. They have lived in the same suburban home for nearly 40 years. It is where they raised their children. It is where birthdays, Christmas lunches, and family milestones happened. But now the stairs are getting harder. The garden is becoming too much. The rates keep rising. Repairs never seem to end. So they decide to sell. They plan to buy a smaller townhouse closer to their daughter. Their old home sells for a strong price. After paying off a small remaining loan and the selling costs, they are left with a substantial amount of money. They buy the townhouse, but because it is cheaper than the family home, they also keep a sizable amount of cash left over. At first, they feel relieved. The move is done. The new home is comfortable. There is extra money in the bank. Retirement finally feels a little safer. Then, months later, their pension changes. Not because they went back to work, not because they inherited a fortune, not because they made some wild investment, but because the family home that was once exempt has been converted into accessible financial assets, at least in part, through the money that remained after the move. That is the mistake, not the decision to downsize itself. The mistake is assuming that downsizing is automatically harmless for your Centrelink payment. It is not. The rules are more nuanced than that, and if you do not understand the nuance, you can walk into a payment reduction with your eyes wide open and still never see it coming. Now pause there. This is the first big point you need to understand. Your principal home is generally treated very differently from money in the bank. For age pension purposes, your main home is usually exempt from the assets test. But once you sell that home, the proceeds do not automatically keep the same treatment forever. The portion you genuinely intend to use to buy, build, rebuild, repair, or renovate a new principal home may receive a temporary assets test exemption for up to 24 months after a qualifying home sale, but other amounts can be assessed differently. That sentence may sound technical, so let me say it in plain English. Centrelink can give you time to move from one home to another. If you sell your main home and genuinely intend to use some or all of those sale proceeds to secure a new main residence, that intended amount may be temporarily protected from the assets test. But the protection is not a blank check. It does not necessarily cover money you simply choose to keep aside. It does not automatically cover every dollar from the sale, and it does not mean the proceeds become completely invisible for all Centrelink purposes. This is where retirees get caught. They hear, you have 24 months. and assume that means the money from the sale cannot affect anything for 2 years. That is not the full story. The amount intended for the replacement home may be exempt from the assets test for that period, but deemed income can still apply, and any extra sale proceeds held as financial assets may be assessed under the normal rules. Services Australia also states that if you sell your home, you should tell Centrelink within 14 days. Let that settle. The home itself may have been exempt. The money from selling it may not be. That one transition from property to cash is where the risk begins. And if this channel helps you understand the government rules that affect Australian retirees before they become expensive surprises, subscribe and turn on notifications now. These are not always the stories that make headlines, but they are often the rules that determine how much support reaches your bank account. Now let us go deeper, because there are several different mistakes hiding inside the downsizing decision. The first mistake is assuming that Centrelink only cares whether you buy another home. In reality, Centrelink also cares how much of the sale proceeds you intend to use for that new home. Suppose you sell for $1 million and buy a replacement home for $700,000. Very broadly speaking, the amount genuinely set aside for the new home may be treated differently from the amount left over. That leftover amount may become assessable because it is no longer tied to securing the new principal residence in the same way. Now, the exact outcome depends on your full circumstances, and I am not calculating your personal pension here. But the principle is vital. The portion connected to your next main home may receive one treatment, the surplus amount can receive another, and that surplus can matter a lot, because many older homeowners do not downsize just to move. They also downsize to unlock money. They want a buffer. They want help with medical costs. They want to travel a little. They want to renovate the new place. They want to help children. They want financial breathing room. All of that is understandable. But Centrelink does not assess your intentions emotionally. It assesses how the money is held, what it is intended for, and how the rules apply. That means the same downsizing decision that improves your lifestyle can also increase your assessable assets if a large amount is left over. Now, look closely. This is not a warning against downsizing. Downsizing can be a very smart move. It can reduce maintenance. It can release equity. It can make everyday life easier. It can help you live in a safer, more manageable place. The warning is this: do not make a downsizing decision using only property logic. You also need Centrelink logic. Property logic asks, what can we sell for? What can we buy? How much cash will be left? Centrelink logic asks, what portion of this remains connected to a new principal home? What portion becomes accessible? How will deemed income apply? What must be reported and when? If you only ask the first set of questions, you are not planning. You are guessing, and guessing with retirement income is a bad game. Now let me give you another example. Imagine a single pensioner named Margaret. She is 76. Her home is worth more than she ever expected, mainly because property prices have risen over the years. She decides to sell and move into a smaller unit. She wants something easier to clean, cheaper to run, and closer to public transport. She sells well. She buys the unit. She has a healthy amount left over. At first, she feels secure. She tells herself, this is good. I have downsized. I have money left. I have done the prudent thing. Then Centrelink reassesses her position. Why? Because while her old home was generally outside the assets test, the cash left after buying the new home can become a financial asset. And financial assets can affect both the assets test and the income test through deeming. This is the part people underestimate. Retirement planning is not just about your net worth. It is about the form your wealth takes. $1 million in your exempt home is not assessed the same way as a large sum sitting in a bank account after sale. Same household wealth in a broad sense, different Centrelink result. That difference can be decisive. Now stop and ask yourself a hard question. Have you ever heard someone say, I should probably downsize because I am asset rich but cash poor. That phrase is common. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If you convert too much exempt home equity into assessable cash without understanding the pension consequences, you may become cash richer but pension poorer. That does not automatically make downsizing wrong, but it does mean the decision needs to be judged on the whole picture, not only on the amount of money released. And this gets even more important once we talk about superannuation. Many homeowners have heard of the downsizer contribution. It allows eligible people aged 55 or over to contribute up to $300,000 from the proceeds of selling their home into super, subject to the eligibility rules. ATO guidance also warns that selling your home and making a downsizer contribution may affect income support payments such as the age pension. That rule sounds attractive, and for some people it can be very useful. But here's the trap for homeowners over 67. Once you are over age pension age, superannuation is generally relevant to the Centrelink means tests. In a way, it is not for people who are still under age pension age and not drawing a pension from it. So, putting sale proceeds into super through a downsizer contribution does not necessarily make the money disappear from Centrelink's view. That is crucial. Some retirees hear super and think tax effective. That may be true from one perspective, but they then jump to Centrelink friendly. That does not automatically follow. A contribution can be permitted under tax and super rules while still affecting your age pension position through the income and assets tests. Different system, different outcome. And if you do not separate those systems in your mind, you can make a decision that looks clever in one column but hurts you in another. Now, let me slow this down. There are at least three separate rulebooks involved when a retiree downsizes. 1. Property and housing rules. 2. Superannuation and tax rules. 3. Centrelink income and assets rules. People get into trouble because they treat those three rulebooks as if they are one. They are not. A move can be good housing strategy. A contribution can be legal super strategy. And the combined result can still change your pension. That does not mean never do it. It means stop looking for one magic answer. There is no single sentence that says, downsizing is always good, or downsizing is always bad. The truth is sharper than that. Downsizing can improve your retirement dramatically if you plan it properly. Downsizing can also reduce your age pension if you unlock home equity and then misunderstand how the money will be assessed. The rule is not emotional, it is mechanical, and mechanical systems punish vague thinking. Now, here is another point almost everyone misses. The moment you sell your home, reporting becomes critical. Services Australia says that if you sell your home, you should let Centrelink know within 14 days. And more broadly, age pension recipients are expected to report changes in circumstances that may affect their payment. That means you cannot treat the sale as a private matter that only becomes relevant when you eventually buy something else. Centrelink needs to know that the home has been sold. They need to know what you intend to do with the proceeds. They need to know how much is intended for the next main home. They may need evidence around the sale and your plans, and if your circumstances change again, such as deciding not to buy, buying for less than expected, or keeping more cash than planned, the assessment can change too. Now be honest. How many people do you think understand that before they sell? Not many. Most people focus on real estate agents, settlement dates, removalists, legal paperwork, and whether the new place has enough storage. Almost nobody sits at the kitchen table and says, before we sign anything, let us map how Centrelink will classify every portion of the proceeds. But they should, because that question can be worth thousands over time. Now let us talk about the 24-month exemption again, because this is where misunderstanding becomes dangerous. For qualifying principal home sales from 1st January 2023, sale proceeds you intend to use for a new principal home can generally be exempt from the assets test for up to 24 months. Depending on circumstances, a further extension may be possible, but the exemption is not permanent. and it can end earlier when the new home is acquired. That means this temporary window is not the same thing as a permanent safe zone. It is time to complete the housing transition, nothing more. If you sell, hold funds, delay buying, then change plans, the way those proceeds are assessed can shift. If the purchase costs less than expected, the surplus matters. If you keep substantial money in a financial asset, normal deeming can apply to that extra amount. If the exemption period ends before your plan is complete, the protections you assumed would last may no longer apply. So do not hear 24 months and mentally file it under problem solved. A better interpretation is I may have a temporary window and I need to manage it properly. That is a very different mindset. Now, let me bring this back to homeowners over 67 specifically. At this stage of life, a property decision is rarely just a property decision. It can affect your pension rate, your deemed income, your assessable assets, your eligibility for concessions, your sense of security, your estate planning, your aged care expectations later, your ability to help family, and your monthly budget. That is why the downsizing rule deserves more attention than it gets. The house is not just bricks and land. For many older Australians, it is the single largest financial asset they have. And when that asset changes form, the Centrelink consequences can become significant. Now pause once more, because this is the line that matters most. Centrelink does not simply ask, did you downsize? It asks, what happened to the value that came out of the home? That is the real question. Did it become another principal home? Did it become a smaller home plus cash? Did part of it go to super? Did part of it remain in savings? Did part of it go to family? Did part of it go into renovations? Every answer can matter, and that is why two people can both say, I downsized, but get completely different Centrelink outcomes. One person sells and uses almost all proceeds to secure the next home. Another sells, buys much cheaper, and holds a large cash balance. Another sells, contributes to super, and is already over age pension age. Another sells, delays buying, and assumes the temporary exemption means they can stop paying attention. Same word, downsizing. Very different assessments. Now, I want to challenge one more assumption. Some homeowners think if downsizing reduces my pension, that means the government punishes me for being sensible. I understand why it feels that way, but the system is not designed around feelings. It is designed around accessible resources. While the home remains your exempt principal residence, it is treated one way. When wealth moves out of that exempt home and into forms Centrelink does assess, the pension calculation can change. You may like that rule or dislike it, but pretending it is not there will not help you. You need to plan around the actual system, not the system you wish existed. And that is where most bad retirement decisions begin. People build plans around fairness arguments instead of eligibility rules. Fairness matters politically, rules matter financially. Do not confuse them. Now, if you are already thinking about downsizing, there are several questions you should be asking before you do anything irreversible. How much will the new home cost? How much will likely be left over? How will the leftover amount be held? Will any of it be contributed to super? If so, how will that be treated given your age and your age pension position? Will you buy immediately, or will funds be held for some time? How much of the sale proceeds do you genuinely intend to use for the replacement principal home? What has to be reported to Centrelink and when? And most importantly, are you estimating the pension impact before the sale, or only reacting after it? That last question is the difference between planning and damage control. And for older Australians, damage control is usually far more stressful than upfront clarity, because once the sale is complete, you may have less flexibility than you imagined. The property is gone, the money has moved, the pension assessment begins to reflect the new reality. And if you never modeled the consequences, you are left adjusting after the fact. That is exactly what you want to avoid. The retirement years should not be filled with preventable surprises. They should be built on informed choices. And that is the part almost everyone misses. The moment the house is sold, the issue is no longer only where you live. It is what every dollar from that sale becomes in Centrelink's eyes. And that is why, before you sell, before you sign, and before you tell yourself that downsizing is automatically the smart move, you need to slow down and ask one serious question. What will this decision do to my Centrelink payment after the dust settles? Because the sale price alone does not tell the whole story. The size of the replacement home matters. The amount of cash left over matters. Where that money goes matters. How long you hold it matters. And whether Centrelink has the correct, updated picture matters. This is where too many retirees make the same mistake. They treat downsizing like a property decision first, a lifestyle decision second, and a Centrelink decision last. That order is backwards. If you receive the age pension, Centrelink needs to be part of the conversation from the beginning, not after settlement, when the payment has already changed. Now let us make the lesson very practical. If you are over 67 and thinking about downsizing, do not rely on broad advice like, it should be fine, or everyone does it. Your situation is not everyone else's situation. The right answer depends on your home value, the next property you buy, how much money is left over, your other assets, your relationship status, and whether you are already receiving a full or part pension. That is why a decision that helps one retiree can hurt another. One couple may downsize and barely see a difference. Another may unlock enough accessible assets to reduce their pension. Another may discover that money they thought was harmless cash is now changing their income and assets assessment. And another may simply delay buying the next home without realizing the temporary rules they are relying on will not protect them forever. This is not something to guess your way through. It is something to map out clearly before acting. Now, one more reality check. Downsizing can still be the right decision. If your home is too large, too expensive, too isolated, or too physically demanding to maintain, moving may improve your quality of life in a major way. A smaller home closer to family, doctors, shops, or support services may be worth far more than preserving every last dollar of pension. But that decision should be conscious. You should know the trade off. You should not discover the trade off by surprise months later. That is the difference between making a strategic retirement move and stumbling into a financial consequence you never planned for. So, here is the simplest way to think about it. Your home may be exempt. The money released from your home may not be. That one sentence explains the entire risk. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember that. Because once you sell, Centrelink may stop looking at an exempt principal residence and start looking at accessible money, financial assets, and deeming consequences. And if you have not planned for that shift, your pension can change. Before you downsize, calculate more than your moving costs. Calculate the Centrelink impact. Before you celebrate the extra cash, ask how that cash will be assessed. Before you assume the move improves everything, check whether it weakens your pension position. And before you rely on vague reassurance from family, friends, or real estate talk, get advice that actually considers the age pension rules. Because at this stage of life, a home sale is not just a sale, it is a retirement income decision. It is a Centrelink decision. It is a long term security decision. And the seniors who protect themselves best are not the ones who avoid every change. They are the ones who understand the consequences before making one. So if downsizing is on your mind in 2026, do not panic and do not rush. Plan carefully. Check the rules. Understand what happens to the proceeds. And make sure that the move meant to simplify your retirement does not quietly make your fortnightly payments smaller than you expected.